Hello, and welcome to the Dissident Mama podcast. Today, my guest is Lana Lokteff. Lokteff is part of the indie media website known as Red Ice, where she co-hosts Red Ice TV Live and Weekend Warrior with her husband and Red Ice founder, Henrik Palmgren. She is also the host of the interview show Radio 314, another Red Ice production. Besides creating articles and videos for Red Ice, Lokteff also owns her own organic clothing line called Lana's Llama. The Oregon native is passionate about health, European identity politics, and ancestral traditions, of which hers are Slavic. Welcome, Lana.
Good to be here. Thank you very much. I just discovered you not too long ago when you wrote me. I was like, oh, she's been doing some good stuff. You've been writing since like 2016 or something?
Late 2016, yes.
There you go. And I was surprised by your age. I'm like, you look great.
Oh, well, thank you. Yes, I just divulged to her I turned 50 last year. I don't think I've been hiding it from my people, but yeah, it's a big deal. Thank you, dear. So I've been trying to hook up with you since December. I've known about your work for a long time. Busy schedules, then some sicknesses. Maybe the coof worked its way through your family, but calendar glitches. Here we are, late March. But I finally get to talk to you, and we recently had International Women's Day. So here we are, two sisters bonding. So
there you go.
It's
a real kind of sister, real kind of sisterhood. We don't need a calendar and like corporate America celebrating us, right?
Exactly. So we're going to catch it right on the coattails of that, but no, do real sisterhood. So I have a ton of questions for you. So we're going to dive straight in. So Red Ice has been around for a very long time. It was started by your husband before you were his wife, correct?
Yes, correct. He started in writing format, and that was, before 9/11 happened. Around that period was a big trigger for a lot of people to get into more alternative research topics and ask questions. That was a big trigger for him. So 2001, and then he started podcasting around 2007, and it was all kinds of alternative research topics you can think of. He was basically like the coast to coast AM of Europe. I don't know if you know, like, do you remember Art Bell and Coast to Coast AM in America? Yeah. So he was kind of that version, but out of Sweden, and he was very popular in Europe. And then I came on board when we met in 2008. And then I said, hey, we should do some TV stuff. He had already been doing some video stuff, but do some TV stuff. And then I kind of helped, writing texts and booking guests and diving in that way. And then he said, well, you should do your own show. And I was like, I don't know. So then 2012, I started as a podcast, and then we switched over into doing video interviews a couple years later. Yeah.
Gosh, that's fascinating. So y'all had quite a bumpy yet wonderful ride all at the same time, but both sides of that. But let's get to how you, a gal from, I guess, Portland, you've lived quite a few places, but a gal from the Pacific Northwest, how did you hook up with this Swede?
So at the time I thought, the world is, the New World Order is closing in, this was a long time ago. Now it's like, wow, even worse. So I had family down in the South Pacific. So I thought, let's go to Australia. Isn't that funny? Because Australia is like big brother craziness right now, like one of the worst places to be. But anyway, I was living in Australia, and I was actually listening to Henrik's podcast, visiting my brother, and he was in the Fijian Islands, and I had different guys that were chasing me, wanted to get married and stuff. I was like, they're just not the right guy, and I wish I could meet a guy like Henrik. Where's the guys like Henrik? And then my brother's like, you should contact him. And at the time we were working on a music project together, because I have a background in music. And so I knew that Henrik also wrote music. And my brother said, you should contact him. Let's do some kind of music project together or something. So I contacted him, and we just started writing, and then we hit it off. And then he said, why don't you come up to Sweden? And I just stayed. So I basically just moved in with him right away, which is crazy, because it's nothing I would have ever done before. And then we just hit it off, and here we are over a decade later. So we didn't have the normal, dating, come pick me up for dinner kind of thing, because we're in two different countries. What do you do?
Right.
I had all my stuff put on a boat from Australia and shipped into Sweden, and I paid crazy taxes just to get my used clothing into Europe. It was insane.
That's nuts. Yeah, when I first met my husband, who was obviously then just a guy who was not my husband, it was just a long distance state to state thing. So I can't even imagine being on different continents. That's pretty fascinating.
That's why I tell people, and they're like, "Oh, long distance." I'm like, reminder, my husband is Swedish.
Right, right, exactly. So red ice, been around a long time, started by your husband. You came on board, iterations in dealing with new technology and a changing world. Tell us how you would describe red ice as a whole. Kind of what's its mission? Like, what's your elevator pitch when you meet people and they're like, what, red ice, what is this?
Well, it's a truth seeking journey. That's the number one thing I would say. I mean, we've kind of been around the block as far as topics that we cover. There isn't anything that we haven't covered. There hasn't been anything that's been off limits, which has gotten us in trouble. But I would say we are first and foremost interested in the truth, no matter where the truth takes us. And sometimes it has taken us into corners that have gotten us in trouble for talking about those things, but we need to do it. Damn it.
Right.
I mean, that's the whole purpose of what we do.
Okay. And so you've been maligned in the media, attacked with all sorts of ad homs. Your Twitter bio says, "I'm not the woman they say I am." So let's find out a little bit more about who you are.
Yeah, so there's okay. Sorry, go
Yeah,
on. Yeah.
no, go ahead. I was just gonna list off a bunch of questions to ask you who you are, but tell me just like we're having a conversation, not an interview.
Well, I'll say there was a few years when we were really targeted and attacked. We had millions of views. We were growing quickly on YouTube and elsewhere. I would put up a video and easily get over 1 million views. We were getting a lot of mainstream attention during this time that we didn't want, and there was a lot of leftist crazy activists that were just all over our stuff, following everything we did, all these little videos we posted, basically demanding we be disappeared. Get them off the internet. So at one point, BBC World News called me the queen bee of white supremacy. So that's why I say on my Twitter, I'm not the woman that they say I am. And so basically that has spread to all these other, misinfo, disinfo, mainstream media outlets. If you go to my wiki page, it's a total joke. I cannot edit it. Others have tried to edit it, and within 5 minutes, it goes back to what it is. Total lies and propaganda. It says white supremacist. Now I could just laugh at it. White supremacist, Nazi, anti-Semite, blah, blah, blah. And that's what the enemies of truth constantly, they repeat and they reprint those things. So anytime I see when people are called a white supremacist or a Nazi, I think I laugh. I'm like, oh, they must be a decent person, like me, because they call me all those things. I think it's just kind of lost its magic, its power, especially after Trump, because people called him a Nazi white supremacist. Yeah. But like I said, my belief system, and we can get into that if you wanted to know what that is, but I follow the truth no matter where it leads me. And I never would have thought, 10 years ago that I would be here and being attacked so grossly for just talking about things that are so reasonable to me.
Yes, exactly. So I read a Jacobin article about you. Every once in a while, the stars align and Jacobin writes something good, but typically it sounds like an SPLC hit piece.
Oh, yeah.
And it's interesting because it's like, oh, she believes in traditional gender roles, classical ideals of beauty, the nuclear family. She's such a fascist. So it is laughable because, up until 10 years ago, everybody believed in those things. So exactly. It's fascinating. Exactly. Okay, so white supremacists. Let's tackle this first. You're anti-white, correct? I mean, where do people get this idea of this white supremacist thing other than liking white people, liking being white, and not wanting white people to go away? I mean, is there?
Well, that's the thing. They're conflating the two. It used to be a white supremacist was someone who was like, I want to rule over the world and make all these non-whites my subservient slaves, and I hate them just because they're not white, right? That's what it used to mean years ago, and now it just means you're white and you don't hate yourself. You don't have any guilt. You believe in self-determination. You want white people to survive. You don't want your kids learning about anti-white propaganda and how their ancestors are evil and how they're the only people who have sinned on the planet and they're only guilty of genocide and slavery and all these horrible things. That makes you a white supremacist now.
Right.
I mean, but basically I'm not a globalist. I support self-determination for homogenous nations without forced mass immigration and diversity quotas. which only affects European countries, by the way. No one else says that. Pick any non-European country. No one says, oh, it's too black here, or too brown here, or too Jewish here, or too Asian here, or too Mexican here. You need all these other people to come in and enrich your society. No, we only hear that with white countries. It's too white here. Oh, or Sweden doesn't have a culture, or too many white people in this one area is wrong. No other people are forced to become multicultural like we are, right? So when I say pro-European or pro-white, it has nothing to do with European Union, has nothing to do with colonialism. It just means that I support the right of European people to exist in their nations without forcefully becoming a minority. It's really just kind of a simple yes or no. Do you support that or do you not support that? I want Sweden to be Sweden. I support true diversity in the world. I want to see Germans in Germany, French people in France. I want to see Australians in Australia, like this. And when I go, same thing. If I go to India, I want to see Indians or Chinese in China. And I think most people around the world think that's very reasonable and also support that. So really, it's also anti-colonialism when you get down to it.
Yeah. I was going to say it's very decentralist, and the people that would be calling us names, they're the imperialists. They're the ones that want globalism, truly central authority on a scale that encompasses the entire planet. So
exactly.
Yeah,
it's basically, I support, when it comes down to, I was thinking about this, I support the things that create healthy, wholesome humans, which means not supporting a lot of this neoliberalism and things like sex changes and drag queen story hour, these sketchy big pharma jabs. We have open borders, we have censorship, we have all this anti-white propaganda, which is not going to be good for anyone. We can get into that later. But feminism, Agenda 21, this fake environmentalism scam, the war on masculinity, all those things the left is pushing, and some neocons now do too. We call it globo homo, right? These are basically the weapons used to make us, dumb down, subservient slaves to tyrants. And the first people to challenge these tyrants are generally European people or white people, I'd say. So that's why the hard attack against us, because ultimately they want us all, in the pod, eating the bugs, wearing the VR headset, and it's death and it's anti-human, and we should all be against this.
I agree. And the gaslighting, when you say obvious truths that, again, people maybe even 5 years ago all agreed on, and then they make it seem like you're the crazy person. I mean, does that ever wear you down, or have you just gotten a thick skin? I mean, because sometimes the projection and the deflection aimed at you uttering a basic human truth, it's got to frustrate you. I mean, how do you handle that?
It frustrates me. And I have days where it's just like, oh, I need a break. I have to just step away. And then there's other days where I'm really inspired and I want to fight back against this propaganda machine. That's how it is. This is kind of a wave that you ride in life. But I'm encouraged, though, as much as it could be such a downer and a black pill. I know that 5 years ago, when we were talking about, anti-whiteness and the war on white people are like, oh my God, that's not happening, blah, blah, blah. Now you have, normie to your mainstream conservatives who are using the term anti-white. They're against critical race theory. So to me, that is good progress, right? That is people waking up. And the other side, they always push too hard, too fast. And they're pushing this level of tyranny and anti-nature and just anti-true humanity. I mean, they're just going so insane that even the smallest thing is like hate speech and you should be jailed for. And what do you think that's doing? That's going to wake up more people. And ultimately, people want to be free. They can have all the red terror that they want, all the iron curtains that they want, but ultimately, human nature is to fight for freedom. And I am in line with supporting nature, which means also the age-old tradition of, family units and healthy male-female relationships. All these things are warring against. Being honest and respectful about racial differences, and also using technology, I'd say, in ways that don't destroy our humanity and our planet. I'm very concerned about this whole transhumanist agenda on top of things.
Yeah, the whole technocracy thing is very scary. And I think China just recently created a baby like out of whole cloth, like not just through like insemination. I don't know how they did it. I read the article and I was just like blown away, just shocked.
It's freaky. Yeah, we should not be meddling with these things. It's not going to go to a good place. It's frightening to think of that,
And it's interesting because China on the other side, I mean, I don't want to live in China. I have been to China to visit a long time ago in like 2003 or something, but it's like they're becoming all family oriented now. And, they want people to have lots of babies and stuff. And
Oh yeah, they're basically an ethno state, like ethno nationalist, right? And they're even making fun of America and saying that the men are getting feminized, and they have programs to masculinize, their
yeah,
men and their military and stuff. Exactly. So they're getting stronger, and we're getting weaker.
yes,
Interesting.
they're just creating babies in a lab too, which is weird. But on one hand, I mean, it's this crazy world we live in. I find myself in conversations where I say, well, the Chinese are doing this. Again, I don't want to live there, but they get that the sissy boys that's kind of a strange thing, and it's probably not good for society as a whole.
No,
And yeah, so yeah,
no.
it's weird the way the world plays out. So I got doxxed a couple years ago, and then I was hacked recently, and I'm just like
Oh,
small potatoes gal,
did you know who, or did they leave like a marker or anything for who it was? We were hacked once.
For the hack, yeah, I have my guesses. It was actually, I think it was this interesting, the world we live in. I'm an Orthodox Christian, and I think it was a fellow Orthodox Christian. So I,
Oh no.
yeah, so I talked, and I don't know for sure, so I'm not going to say his name, but he had mentioned on social media finding out who my provider was, my hosting and all that. So you complain about leftists all day long and wackadoodle liberals, and it's like supposedly somebody who's
That happens. Oh,
shares a worldview.
that's for sure. I mean, I've
Yeah.
seen plenty of Christians turn on Christians who discuss the things that we discuss.
Right.
There's plenty of that. That's why I also don't align with the American conservatives and these neocons. They just
Mhm.
sell out. They don't conserve anything. They're always
Mhm.
conceding. They're always giving up ground. It's just it's disgusting and sad to watch, actually.
But so I'm small potatoes, it was scary at the time. I was thinking Antifa was going to come to my house after my docs and, throw a brick through my window or something, but, it turned out okay. We lived through it, but I mean, that barely scratches the surface of what y'all have been through. So Red Ice has been banned by major platforms like YouTube, PayPal, Wells Fargo, Coinbase, iTunes, Apple's podcast directory, SoundCloud, Stitcher, on and on and on and on.
Yeah.
How did y'all handle that? Was it one thing that sparked it, first of all? And then how did y'all handle it? And what advice would you give to people?
Okay, so I will say it started with this hack too. In 2017, we experienced obviously a high level hack where even my husband's iPhone was swiped. We had social security numbers, driver's license posted
Whoa.
everywhere. So we even wondered if this wasn't like a FBI thing or a government type of thing, right? Trying to intimidate us or whatnot. But I mean, because Antifa is in the FBI and Antifa is in the CIA and Antifa is the Biden admin, so we had all those details posted, but like no one ever showed up. And at the time we were living in Charleston, South Carolina, and I didn't think there were too many Antifas maybe around there. They know better not to just show up in the South, someone's house, right? Most people are armed. But yes, we've been banned from most popular apps and social media. We cannot have a payment processor for our business. We've been blacklisted as a reputational risk. Having a major bank account, even several credit cards I have had canceled, even though I have perfect credits. Our business is legal. We don't engage in any kind of fraud or pyramid schemes or anything. We're deemed high risk. All of this started when activists were they're basically demanding that we be banned. They find out that we use something, they call them and harangue them and say, oh my God, these white supremacist Nazis, can't cancel them now, right? So we were put on ADL's hit lists. The ADL is basically like a criminal organization and a fraudulent organization, a hypocritical organization. But they had a hit list of, was it 10 channels and people that they wanted out of the way, people that they basically wanted canceled from everything. And sure enough, we were on that list, and and everyone who's been on that list has been canceled and affected in different ways, and that is us. And I just can't imagine, like several years ago, if someone would have said, you can't have a payment processor for your business because because of your thoughts, because of your political views, when nothing you're doing is illegal. It's simply outrageous. Even some of the alternatives, you find out there's always a third party. There's always, you say, oh, there's this credit card processor, this credit card. No, they're usually using some other back end processor. And that what I've learned is there's only 7 big companies on the back end that are actually clearing most of these things. The banking network is actually very small. They circulate these lists. So you have this appearance of, oh, you have choices and options, but you really don't. It's a very small cabal that actually runs things when it comes to finances. And this is part of Operation Choke Point, right? This is something old, where an old tactic of coming after your political enemies. I love seeing what Gab is doing, and hopefully like Gab Pay can take off. I mean, they've had Visa, MasterCard ban him personally. I mean, the bankers are not our friends. It's outrageous to me. And we were doing so well and growing so fast. And that's why they do this. They have to play dirty because the truth is not on their side. If it was total unbridled free speech and we were promoted and we were monetized, we would be winning big time, and they know it. We'd be changing the hearts and minds of people left and right, because people respond to the truth when they see it, when they hear it. That's why they know right-wing YouTube. Remember when they were complaining because it's so popular and they get all these views and that's where all the action is. And then you go to these left-wing YouTube channels where they're highly promoted, and they were hard. They didn't even have a portion of the views, that we have. And now they can't even handle the smallest voices speaking truth and poking holes in their kingdom of lies, because it all starts falling apart. But we're dissidents. We're living on the edge. We're spearheading. We were warning people too, conservatives, a while back, like, you may not care and get in our camp now because you're afraid to touch it, but it's going to happen to you. And it's not going to just happen because of your political views on race or whatever, defending white people. It's going to be all these other things. And sure enough, we've seen it. COVID, the vaccine. Now we see it with Ukraine and Russia. There's no end in sight. That's why people have to put their foot down and fight back and create true alternatives and really support each other. And we couldn't be doing what we're doing if we didn't have a true cult following and supporters who are there to ensure our survival, basically, because that's how bad it is.
I mean, so if somebody gets canceled from a payment processor and then they just start running out of alternatives, I mean, how do people navigate this? What options are there?
Well, there's a crypto, of course. There's some people could still use Patreon or maybe Subscribestar. Entropy is a good company, but there's a lot of people that are just good old fashioned checks and money orders. Maybe e-check if that company can hold like that. That's how bad it is now.
Right.
Yeah,
that's fascinating, until they just say to your bank,
That's right. That's why you don't want to support the big banks. You
Right.
have to do smaller local credit unions. Right. That are nonprofit.
Yeah, because I think that's what happened to Andrew Torba, right? He was Wells Fargo or something, and Lauren Witzke was Bank of America. And then all of a sudden, they go to swipe their debit card and there's no money there.
Yeah, we were a Wells Fargo victim. And it turns out Wells Fargo, and I didn't want to be with them, but I had to, because at the time with my clothing business, I had to do international wire transfer for fabric and stuff, and it was easier. So this is the only reason why I used Wells Fargo. That's where they get you, these big banks. But you realize Wells Fargo has their hand in everything for like so many of these credit card processors, third party Wells Fargo. I mean, we've been through, before we just kind of gave up on that and realized we were on these lists and stuff. We went through, God, in 1 year, we went through like 10 processors. And the longest or the shortest one lasted was 10 days. 10 days. And it was supposed to be like a conservative bank.
Right.
And they just randomly get these emails. Yeah, right. You didn't just randomly get this email. Oh, we saw some bad press about you. And I said, oh, do you sit around and Google all your customers and look for bad press to see if you can continue their merchant account?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. All right. So let's find out a little bit more about you. You come from Oregon, correct? Born and raised there. What was your upbringing like? Were you always a right winger? Did you ever dabble in feminism? I would think most people in Portland will at least dabble in it.
Yeah, so I was born in Portland, Lovejoy Avenue, downtown. I remember being a teenager, walking the streets of Portland, and it was safe, going to grunge shows, with my older brother, and coffee shops. And it was a different time in the Northwest, in the 90s. You didn't have the squatter camps and these like insane people. You always had some homeless teens or whatever, but it wasn't like violent and aggressive and drugs and poop and syringes on the street like that. Right. But there was a time when I was younger, we moved over to Bend, Oregon, which is basically like a upper middle class, all white, resort town, ski town, rivers, lakes. It's beautiful. And when I grew up, I thought of myself as, I grew up in a Christian home. I thought of myself as fiscally conservative, socially liberal at the time, libertarian. We all go through those things. And back then you could be, because you didn't think, oh, just live and let live, right? Just leave me alone and I'll leave you alone, right? And look where that got us, right? If you don't put your foot down, then they're going to come for sex change operations for your kid. But Bend was an amazing place, and now it's been taken over by crazy leftists as well, all of Portland. But I have good memories living there, and I didn't even think about race and all these things because it was safe and people got along. It was mostly Christian. It was mostly traditional, and people just enjoyed the outdoors and all that. It wasn't until I moved into the big cities where I realized what was really going on. So I kind of grew up in a very sheltered, nice, lovely world in a resort town at the time. I'm looking back, it was a great childhood, and I mourn thinking, are my kids going to be able to have that? That's why I'm in Northern Idaho now, but thinking of all the things that we got to enjoy, us as kids, and things we didn't have to worry about. Our kids might not experience that. We might not even be able to travel on airplanes.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We've taken our children, I have 3 sons, out of the country twice, and we got their passports renewed during COVID, 2020, like the thick of it, and we were able to get all that done. I thought it was going to take forever. It happened in 6 weeks, and we I think about it often. My kids take Russian lessons. We wanted to go back to Russia. Even anywhere, go to Scotland, where both my husband and I have ancestry. And it's like, that may never, ever happen. And it is really, really frightening to think about that, because the whole world closed off to you. Not just you're not able to flee possibly, but to experience other cultures. And here we are supposed to be these horrible people that hate everybody who's not like us. And I want to go see what other cultures are like,
Yeah, and it's a good experience. I traveled the world when I was young. And even when I was older, I've been to every continent in the world. I've seen how other people live. I've been to parts of Africa where I'm the first white person they've seen. And yes, the kids were touching my hair. I didn't think it was racist. And I just don't know if our kids are going to be able to have those experiences. And that's very odd and strange to think of that. But the best that we can do now I'm thinking of more locally building tight, like-minded communities, having your village, having your tribe, making sure there's lots of kids that they can play with, that they can grow up with, that they can relate to. And we have that in Northern Idaho. It's a special place. And I know that there's different pockets of that in America. So hopefully we can keep those nice pockets the way that they are. Tons of homeschoolers in Idaho, like basically everywhere. Like, I love that you go out during the daytime and there's kids in all these parks and they're riding bikes because they're taking breaks from homeschool. They're not in the Prussian school system being conditioned and told this brainwashing, which I love to see.
Now, I know you don't talk about your kids much, but can you tell us how many you have?
Yeah, 2, and planning on trying to have another.
Excellent.
I started late. Yeah, there you go. That feminist propaganda, unfortunately, it gets in there in different ways, and you don't even realize it. I didn't think of myself as a feminist, but looking back, there's things I said, choices I made that were very feminist, that weren't the best thing for me as a woman at the time. Then once I got married and had kids, I was like, oh my gosh, I should have done this sooner. We should have started this sooner. I'm missing out. I was sold a lie. I was cheated. It's the biggest lie people tell you. Don't have kids, don't get married, just have a good job, buy the 200 pairs of shoes, and you don't need no man and all that stuff. Kids are so much work. No, it's amazing. Sure, it could be, I don't sleep much. That's probably the hardest part. They keep me up a lot. They're very active. They're very wild, but it's amazing and it's life-changing, and you discover so much of who you are. It tests you in different ways. It's like a big mirror. And I know your kids are a little older now, so it's you get these big rewards. You put in those sacrifices later, but then it's like it really is fruitful in the future and amazing. And people say, well, in hard times, you shouldn't be having kids. And I say, no, in hard times, we should be having lots of kids. Good people need to have lots of kids. I think if like my family and escaping communism, and they did with 5-6 kids walking to China, is like, then darn it, I should be able to have a few kids during these times.
Yes. Yeah, they say, oh, it's expensive to have a kid, people, have these charts about how much you spend and the thousands and thousands of dollars that, over the kid's lifetime until they turn 18. It's like, having kids is always going to be expensive. So what,
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think people can prioritize better. You don't need to live in a giant house. There are things that you may have to sacrifice, and it is worth it. And I didn't have my first kid till I was 36. So I
Yeah.
preach.
See? So yeah, you get it.
I preach the same thing that you're saying, because I meet these young people and I'm just like, young married people who don't have babies, and I'm just, what are you wasting your time?
Yeah, see, for me, I didn't meet my husband until my late 20s, and sometimes you don't meet the right person until that time. But once you do, get busy.
I'm with you.
Not going to regret it.
So you would say during, you had mentioned that you maybe subscribe to some kind of generic feminist notions, but you were never, hardline marriage is an oppressive institution and things like that.
No, I don't think I was even really that political. And I think a lot of women aren't or weren't back then. Now they're just like stark raving mad. But, but it's that female independence, that gets put in you, or like, oh, I need a backup plan.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, it's good to be self-reliant as a woman, but it's okay to want a man.
Yes.
That you can rely on.
Absolutely. So you homeschool, I take it, like you were referring to earlier?
Yeah. So we're working on homeschool pods to be able to do that, so that the kids can learn with, other kids, as opposed to just learning. Some kids learn really well from their mom, but some kids learn better from a teacher or someone else. I have friends that are educators. I have a friend, she has 6 kids and she's a teacher, and she's like, I can't teach my own kids. They won't even listen to me. So she has to have someone else teach,
Well, tell me about that. Is that like a co-op?
Yeah, so you can basically get, Idaho's very free. There's no rules on what you have to do, or tests or checkups or anything. But what people are doing is basically going in on a tutor, a homeschool tutor or a teacher together, and getting several kids together, and then she'll teach, right? So you can do it in one home.
Okay.
Kids of the same age.
You're not driving. Go ahead.
It's like a mini classroom, basically, kind of getting back to like Little House on the Prairie or something.
Right. Okay. So similar to a co-op, but instead of maybe, my co-op, we meet somewhere. So if you had a pod at your house, it would be you hired a French teacher and everybody comes to your house to take the French lessons. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yes. Homeschooling, people are always innovating. It's fascinating. So you used to live in Sweden, though, when you met your husband. Then y'all did a part-time thing for a while?
Actually, no. It was, let's see, 2012. Yeah, we said, let's go to America for a while, because it was pretty gray and cold for a while up there too. And I was like, I think I need some sunshine, did the West Coast thing. So we went to the Carolinas, South Carolina, Charleston, which is beautiful. I love it there. And then just to have the American experience. And then that's when I started really waking up to the anti-white agenda, because we had been looking at looking at a lot of messaging and how conditioning works and mind control and propaganda. We were really getting into it and studying it at the time. And I started watching TV shows, movies, commercials. And one trend I noticed is, wow, it's hating white people on everything that I see. And that's what really that's what got us down this road, looking at other researchers and authors and books. And then we're like, oh, people were warning and talking about these things actually for quite a long time.
Right. Right. Exactly. I know some people are still just kind of waking up to the anti-white thing, but they won't use the word anti-white, because I guess you can't even say white anymore. They all say CRT or whatever. And I'm like, let's just call it anti-white. But I remember, knowing what was happening. But when Netflix had that show, Dear White People, do you remember that?
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, that's when I canceled my Netflix. That was like, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago or something. Good. Horrifying.
Don't need it. And it's everywhere. I can't enjoy watching any movies or TV shows, because I see propaganda and I see it in everything. And I'm like, I can't enjoy this. People are like, can you just turn it off? No, I can't just turn that off in my brain and watch it and support this garbage coming into my psyche right now,
And it seems so obvious now, I don't know how anybody can watch it.
Yep. I know, that's why when Russia was laughing, kind of, when the Netflix canceled over there, and Pornhub and all these places, they were like, oh no, we can't get Pornhub and Netflix. I'm like,
exactly.
The best thing that could happen for the Russian people, right?
Yes, score. Do your kids know Swedish, just out of curiosity?
Yeah, so Henrik speaks Swedish to them.
So cool.
My Russian is really rusty. I have more child level, because my grandparents were all Russian, so I spoke that around them. But my parents are fluent, so I asked my parents to speak Russian to them. And then I speak English to them, so that way they can grow up with a few languages. Yeah, I know your kids are learning Russian too. It's hard. That's a hard language.
They are. Yeah. I mean, I know nothing. Spasibo. That's about it.
До свидания.
Yeah, that's it. It's, and I like to think I'm a lifelong learner, but languages, I mean, that's just a part of my brain that I don't know. I used to party a lot. I saw the Grateful Dead almost 100 times. I'm like, I think I killed it with drugs. I don't know, but yeah, I don't know. The language thing is fascinating, but my kids really they're good at languages. And I did teach them some Latin when they were younger. So I'm thinking maybe I had something to do with it, or maybe they're just really good at it. Who knows?
Nice.
Okay. I want to talk about some of the Russian stuff and your ancestry, but let me ask you a few more questions about feminism. So there was a Harpers Magazine article about you in 2017, The Rise of the Valkyries, right? So, it turned out to be this hit piece. It was this whole thing of women on the alt-right, basically making fun of you and like Ayla Stewart and some other people just of having traditional values, and on one hand, did you take it as a compliment that somebody wanted to talk to you from this big magazine, or did you feel slighted that, okay, I thought this person was maybe at least going to try to sort of be objective?
So I was getting requests all the time for interviews, even CNN and documentaries and all this at the time when the alt-right was all the buzz and everything, and they were looking for women and all this stuff. And I was definitely more on the forefront and getting the views, and like, so they were always writing me, asking me to do it. And I was, no, because we know what it's like talking to the media. And then this one girl came around, Sadie, and she was from the Carolinas, actually grew up in a more conservative traditional household. And then she went just full on globo homo New York, saw the light when she went to journalism school in New York and all this, became a feminist and all that. And at the time, she was coming through Charleston, and she said, let's just meet for a drink. And I said, okay, why not? Ayla said that she was going to talk to her. And so I was like, all right, I'll do it. I know Hendrik was like, don't do it. And Hendrik came, and we met her, and we had some good conversations. And they're always nice to your face or try and relate or whatever. And then they'll write these pieces. But she claimed, I'll just be neutral. I'm just going to write your words. But what they do is they write your words in a way to make it look like putting you down for believing those things. Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, she thinks family units are healthy. And then like they fill in all the stuff in between of why this is horrible to think this way. But that went huge. It went all over the place. In fact, she won awards for this Harper's article. It went on the cover, and then it was just kind of the same crap was circulating all over mainstream media. They basically took that same story and were republishing it, and then it became like the latest biggest thing. And then it became a war basically on white women who are housewives, who support traditional families, who aren't feminists. It was just outrageous. I remember even New York Times did a piece on like the housewives of white supremacy, with these women vacuuming and how they're like evil because of their thoughts and their home and raising these kids and cooking dinner for their husbands. And I remember I had joked around at the time, like, oh, pretty soon they're going to say housewives are the new terrorists. And that's pretty much what happened in that piece. But yeah, it was a whole huge hoopla surrounding that. But I'm glad it's kind of died down a little bit for
until
now.
I bring it up.
Yeah.
But I didn't realize that I'd never read that. And, I was following a lot of that back in 2017, and I know Ayla. And so I was just like, I don't know, somehow I totally missed that, I guess, because I was busy raising my children and doing other things. But it's interesting, though, because they use the term the Valkyries, and Masonius Rufus from Identity Dixie sometimes will talk about the women of the right who will be bold and speak truth to power, for lack of a better way to say it, and how we're pro-patriarchy, we're anti-feminist, but yet, you have this successful venture on top of being, a domestic goddess, right? Ayla had Wife with a Purpose on top of having like 800 kids or whatever she has,
That's right.
It's not that like, hey, we're living the, feminist dream, and it's just, it's very
like we're working for the man at some corporation. We're making videos at home. You mean you can multitask, right. It's a different era, and we have technology at our advantage. People always say, trad wives. What is that? Like, you just have to be cooking and cleaning all day and everything has to be perfect and you can't comment on the world that you live in at all because then you're a feminist. I don't subscribe to that either.
Right.
Being a traditional housewife isn't some kind of doctrine with all these rules. I say you have to do what's right for you, your personality, your family. Some women are going to fill roles that maybe aren't super traditional, but just you have to do what's good for your family and get done what needs to be done. And also, when you say traditional women, what era? Because speaking of Valkyries and all that, I love like the Norse pre-Christian, Nordic and Slavic mythologies and some of the paganism and the folklore and stuff. Women were different. They wore different hats back then. It wasn't like they were 1950s housewives where they could stay home. Not all women can stay home. Not all, they can't all afford it, So are you upper middle class woman? Are you a woman that doesn't have much? Are you a homesteading wife? So there's different ways that you can be a traditional woman, right?
Exactly.
And I think smart women, they see the threats, right, that come with this loss of masculinity in our society, and they feel that they need to say something about it because it's men have built the civilization. And for us, by the way, I think they've done all of this for women and their families. It's men who have enabled even these whining feminists to spew their crap. And I think it's inspiring for our men when we see them defend them in our feminine way. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No. I think that is an excellent point because a lot of the women who are, have some kind of platform, myself in my own way, you work with your husband. We see your faces, we see y'all together. I think a lot of times it's just the woman because in my situation, my husband's the breadwinner. You don't know who he is. Whatever, somebody could figure out who he is, but because I got doxxed and people know my name. But the point is, he's doing the thing that provides for our family to provide me the opportunity. And he's the one who encourages me to do it because I actually wanted to give it up just after my hack. I just was like, I'm done. Everybody can go jump in a lake. The world's going to burn. Say what?
But then that person would win, right?
Yes. And then my husband was one of the people who's like, well, you can't stop. And I was like, I can't, dagnabbit. Okay. So, behind these women who are pro-patriarchy is a man saying, please do this, affording somebody the economic opportunity to do it. So
absolutely.
I think that's why there are some Valkyries. I can think of quite a few women who would call themselves pro-patriarchy, anti-feminist, and you don't know who their husbands are. And I think that's
that's awesome. And I think we need those women. We need those voices out there, as many as possible, to reach other women and to fight back in the propaganda war. It's very important. I think that's why the attack on, that whole piece we were just talking about in women in general was really also a tactic to try and silence and intimidate other women from speaking out about these reasonable and rational viewpoints to make an example. Like, if you talk about these things, we'll write these articles and dox you and call you a white supremacist. I had these articles that were circulating around, and friends from 20 years ago were like laughing, like, oh my God, there's little Lana and this thing called the queen bee of white supremacy, and like, this is hilarious. And like, and then there were other friends that literally old friends that I hadn't been friends with for a long time, but like had to write me and disown me and all this stuff. It's just like, it's amazing how they can know you, they can have experiences with you, but once they see it on CNN, then oh my God, then that's real. That must be the truth.
Exactly. Yeah, we'll get into that with the whole Russia thing in a little bit. But what do you think about this? So, we live in these crazy volatile times. Sometimes a man is possibly working for a corporation, so his wife sometimes has to be the one to speak up. What if we didn't live in this crazy world? What do you think about women's roles as far as being political people, being involved in, I don't know, maybe a public persona of social and political commentary? Should women be politicians in a perfect world? Should we repeal the 19th Amendment? Is it just because where we're at now? Like, sometimes I just think I just want to take a nap and be done with all this. Would you not want to be doing this, or are you kind of a political junkie? Because I kind of think I'm a political junkie.
And that's okay. I think, well, first of all, with that, a lot of women in politics, they're train wrecks. It's horrible. And you've got the Jacindas and New Zealand and the Merkels and all these other, the Clintons, they're horrible. So this idea that, oh, it would be better with women in charge, no, it'd be even worse, as we've seen,
Okay, yeah.
But I think it depends on the season of your life when it comes to politics and women in politics. I think generally younger women, obviously, we're not built for it. We have other priorities. We can't be stretched out in all these different places at the same time. Even for me, it's hard to have that balance of small children and politics. That's a hard road for a lot of women. A lot of women aren't built for that, but I have the support of my husband, and I do it with my husband. But if you're at a season in your life when your kids are older and you can do those things and you can contribute and you have that fire in you, and I say why not? Get involved in local politics or the school board, or I think that could be a plus in the end. Really,
Yeah,
I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, you mentioned the B word, balance. I have a hard time balancing, because writing articles takes research. A lot of times I don't really know what my opinion is on something until I research. And the work y'all do and the video, the production is so amazing. And you're a great interviewer. I mean, it takes a lot of time. Do you ever feel like, oh man, this is taking so much away from the kids? Why am I doing this? But on the flip side, you're doing it for your kids. Like, do you have that internal struggle?
Exactly. Sometimes I do. And when I have that, when it becomes too heavy or too much, or I'm second guessing something, I just take a break.
Yeah.
And I'll do that. I'll have co-hosts and I say, okay, I'm going to take a break and I'm going to do these other things. And usually that feeling subsides. You work through it. You recharge. You take care of the things that you need to feel better. And once you feel whole again, you're like, okay, I'm going to get back on that horse. And for me, if I could be doing anything, I still love doing this. My favorite thing is scripting short videos and doing those things that can inspire or wake people up, or put a lot of information in like a 5-minute video to try and persuade people or change their mind. Like, I love to write and I love to record those things. So I would be doing that anyway. Because a lot of times if I'm just playing, trucks with the boys or whatever, I also think about, I'm sitting there like thinking of script ideas and writing, like sometimes I can't give 100% because that's the world we live in. Like you said, yes, I'm doing this also for their future. And I think one day they'll understand, oh, when you were sidetracked when we were playing monster trucks, or you didn't watch me play my video game.
Right. I'm glad to hear you say that, because I'm always thinking about, oh, the next essay I'm going to write, or man, I really should have put that in it. Or if I'm working on an essay or 20, which kind of is my thing, I'm working on 800 at the same time. I'm thinking about it and I'm like, this is why, great authors like go live out in the woods and become alcoholics, is because that's all they do. They're just thinking about their craft. But I don't want to go do that. But
but you have a talent and you have a skill and you're good at it, so it's good to put that time into it, because it's also fulfilling and rewarding, and it's important to get that information out there.
And I think you making the 5-minute videos, I can't do that. I cannot write short. My husband has been saying for years, write shorter. And I'm like, I try, honey. And I'm like, I capped it at 2,000 words. Isn't that great? He's like, oh, nobody's going to read that. But people do read it. And I have a very niche following, because the people who read me like the long, they like the deep dive. But, I would love to be able to do what you do, talking about deep things and doing it in 5 minutes. It's a really good talent to have.
It's a craft. You have to hone that craft, like all things.
Okay, let's get into the Russia-Ukraine thing. Let's talk a little bit about your ancestry. Your let me start again. Great grandparents fled Bolshevism by walking to China. What? Tell us about that.
Yeah, I oftentimes wonder, why did they not go the other direction? I guess they felt that they would get caught more or something, or the chances, of getting killed were higher. Exactly. They lost everything. They were farmers. I had some Cossacks in my family. I had some blue bloods, independent business owners, right? So they targeted, during the Bolshevik Revolution, they targeted mainly independent business owners, farmers, the middle class, the upper middle class. So they went on the run because they didn't want to be mass murdered. At least 60 million Russians were killed. And then you had the Ukrainian, the Holodomor, that they were starved, right? So my family, they left like a lot of people did, and they walked by foot, went to China with their with their children, with some family, with some friends. In fact, on my dad's side of the family, they have a book that details their journey, even of a great grandfather who broke out of a gulag and then he died a few days later. Stories of how they had to drink their pee on the journey because they didn't have water. I mean, yeah, it's horrible. And my great grandparents died shortly after the journey. My grandparents were young at the time, on both sides of the family, by the way. I'm 80% Eastern European and 20% Baltic, a little Finnish in there. But then they made it into China, where my dad was actually born in Shanghai. And I heard stories that they were treated like garbage in China, basically. And they were trying to enlist them into different conflicts and wars. They saw Mao rising to power. I heard stories about that. And then they they fled there after, I don't know, 5 years or so, went to the Philippines. And then they came over to San Francisco. And I always say, a lot of leftists are like, well, your family were refugees. Yeah, they were true refugees. They didn't come for the Gibbs. And by the way, they had to have sponsors. So there was a whole Christian network of churches that helped ensure that they can, get on their feet till they can get a job. Mm-hmm. My family lost everything. Where's my reparations? A lot of them were wealthy, right? And then they had to go working, sewing jeans in factories in San Francisco. They worked their butts off. They didn't suck off the system. They blended in. They respected the society. You couldn't tell them apart from other people at the time. But even back then, they would get treated like crap. And like, my grandma told a story where someone said, "You Russian bitch." And she's like, "I'm not a communist." At the time I was like, "I'm not a communist." So yeah, I mean, it's horrific. The Bolshevik Revolution. And I remember my grandparents would say, "Oh, it's something that will come to America one day too." And I used to laugh as a kid. And now we are seeing the rise of the American Bolsheviks, which is frightening. Yeah. And I think that they're also meddling here in the Ukraine-Russia situation.
Yeah, there's a Orthodox prophet who says what was started in Russia will end in America, referring to the Bolshevik Revolution, that this Western thing. And let's talk about the Rusophobia a little bit. I feel like when I would tell people that my family and I were thinking about moving to Russia for like a year to immerse our kids in the language, and we have some friends there or whatever, that I was on hold now. But why do you want to move to a communist country? What are you talking about? They're not communists anymore. No. We're leaving the communist country to go visit one that's has been digging itself out of it. But people just cling to this weird Rusophobia that it was all the Russians that caused Bolshevism. I'm like, it's a Western backed thing that was imported there. And I feel like they suffered under it worse than anybody. Were there people that went along with it? Of course. Because if you couldn't flee, I mean, you maybe had to kind of like deal with it and, navigate it as best you could. But, what do you think about this current Rusophobia, especially because of, what your great grandparents and grandparents went through? I had no idea people hated Russians the way they do. I've been to Russia and I go to a Russian Orthodox church and I'm just completely dumbfounded by the hatred toward Russians. I mean, what do you think?
It's absolutely a product of Western media and propaganda and lies. So on one hand, you have these conservatives, exactly. They think Russia's still communist, right? And then you have these liberals who think it's fascist, right? And then everyone's just hating on Russia. Right. And then you have all this stuff in the news that's like Russia, Putin, Nazi, and I think that conditioning has actually worked. And most people, they haven't even been to Russia. They don't even know Russians. They don't know anything about this old, rich, deep culture, and their heritage, and also the history, which a lot of people don't know about, Ukraine and Russia and the conflict, and how old this is. Actually what started like at least 8 years ago. Actually, we could go back farther and we can talk about that. But right. Yeah, this Rusophobia is just utterly insane. And I remember even I was getting that a few years ago. People were accusing me of being a Russian Kremlin asset just because I have Russian heritage. I was born in America. But it's just and now it's just even going to be worse. I think they're going to just accuse. It's going to be a whole other level of censorship where they can just accuse you. Zero Hedge actually got a call from the CIA saying you're promoting Russian assets, Russian spies on your websites and stuff. So just a whole other level of censorship. But Russia and Ukraine, I'm against brotherly wars. I don't want any brotherly wars. But I think that this conflict is socially engineered. Wars usually are socially engineered by people who don't have our best interest in mind, but only theirs and their agenda. Russians and Ukrainians, they're brothers. I think most of them don't want war, and I don't want
Mhm.
Slavs to die. I don't want to see Slavs dying. But the fact is, there has been a war, as I was saying, that's been going on actually for 8 years in Donbass already. And I know people that live there. They've been compiling a lot of the murders and the atrocities that have been happening there against the Russian people. A lot of violent, bloody killings. There's a lot of history. Russia didn't just invade out of nowhere. Ukraine is an interesting, rich history with various people who lived in that area, including Scandinavians, so like my husband, Vikings, right? Yeah, who helped found the Rus.
Mhm.
It's an important area for Russians. Modern Ukraine was entirely created by Russia, or rather, I should say, the Bolshevik communist Russia. So this process started around 1917 during the Bolshevik Revolution, as we were talking about, by Lenin and his commie buddies, right? So right there is kind of not a good beginning. Russians say that they did it in a way that was extremely harsh on Russia by separating and severing what is historically Russian land, right? And that's true. And he developed that idea. Putin, he actually said this by stating that let me find the quote here. Soviet Ukraine is the result of the Bolsheviks' policy and can rightfully be called Vladimir Lenin's Ukraine. He was its creator and he was its architect. And if we fast forward to today, so that's the root point there. It's one of the most corrupt countries in Europe. It's basically been a toilet for all these like elites and billionaires to come money launder, do these shady deals, steal from the people. And of course, America has put in their puppets like Zelensky, who's literally well, he's Jewish, but an actor. He's an actor. Like he was in a TV show playing this stuff, and he ran on wanting peace with Russia. But that's not what we're seeing. What we're seeing is an engineered war, which I believe is to further the Great Reset. It's about starting a war with Russia because Russia, stands in the way of this Great Reset, this new world order, and they don't care how many white lives die in the process. I think a lot of the footage, as you know, that we're seeing just can't be trusted. There's a lot of fakes. There's a lot of staged and older videos coming out. There's even one that was some kids were filming some zombie movie years ago, and they were using this as footage of this girl that was in this blown up building by these Russians. There's even movie producers and American media that are working with Ukraine. So it's basically this huge propaganda war. Is there guns and people dying and missiles? Yeah, there is, but it's kind of like the fog of war at this point because there's so many different factions and people fighting there. I don't think Putin wants to, kill a bunch of Ukrainians. He doesn't want to invade all of Europe and all this hysteria. What I would like to see is Zelensky. He needs to concede on some things and he needs to make peace. But will he, though? I don't think so. He was just at the World Economic Forum and he was talking to Klaus Schwab about basically supporting the Great Reset. They're talking about bringing in Ukraine's in a state of war, and they're talking about bringing in social credit applications, UBIs, digital identities, vaccine passports. Like that's what he was talking about at the World Economic Forum. It's outrageous.
So, would you say, question one, that Vladimir Putin didn't start the war, he's trying to end it, and two, that Russia is, even though they participated in, some of the COVID stuff more so than like we were thinking about moving there from 2020 onward. And it was some of those things that made us kind of drag our feet about getting our visas and stuff. Cause I'm like, oh, no, they're all kind of masky over there and what's going on. And Moscow's crazy and whatever.
Yeah, it's not perfect.
But yes. But would you say it is in resistance to Globo Homo?
Yeah, a lot of people have different theories on that because there's different ways. They say Russia is kind of like 20 years behind everyone else. That Global Homo is kind of seeping in there a little bit. But I think the majority of Russians are still very traditional. Now, especially now, they're seeing what the West is doing. They don't like this neoliberal agenda. They don't like what we're doing to our kids. They see how the West is meddling. They're very awake to these things. We were just playing a bunch of clips from Putin that are very based, where he's very aware, saying things that we're saying. So they're on the right level about that. Sure, there are some dodgy billionaires that associate with Putin, and he's been at World Economic Forums before and all this stuff. Can you trust him 100%? No, probably not. But he says a lot of good things. It's hard to know with politicians. Are they the real deal or are they not? But when I look at how much hate Russia is getting, when all the people that we don't like, who are lying to us and trying to hurt us, are so against Russia, you have to wonder why and look into it a little deeper. I think it will be interesting to see what happens with Russia just completely pulling off from the West, what it does for their people when they don't have the Netflix and the Pornhub and the like the liberal crap being shoved down their throats. What's going to happen to them as a people, and are they going to be more unified? Because I hear over there, and I'm interviewing a Russian journalist next week, that people are more unified and they're more against this neoliberal agenda now after seeing everything that's happening. One thing I don't like with this whole Putin thing is everyone keeps going on about Nazis, right? Nazis, but it's really communist. Yeah. So the Azov, there's a lot of Jews that are funding Azov, like Kolomoisky. There's Israeli money going into this. And now we see the West suddenly making these exceptions, and they're supporting it. Oh, these are the good Nazis, And I said, well, what kind of national socialist fight in the defense of, he's a Jewish president with Jewish funders. It's all very fishy. But Assad, I just played a clip before I came on here, and he said something good about this. The West or Israel will use anyone, whether it's neo-Nazis or communists or whatever at the time, to further their agenda. And they'll flip sides. They fund whoever they have to. In fact, a lot of the times they fund, they create, and they play both sides. And that's what I feel is happening within Ukraine, and it's people that don't have the best interests of Ukrainians in mind. And if they were national socialists, right, wouldn't they want to make peace with Russia as brothers and understand the historical framework if they are anti-communist? I mean, Russia's demands, I think, for self-determination of a couple regions where Russians live and are being harmed is not unreasonable, especially they've been violently murdered there for the last 8 years. So I think it's really cringy that Putin talks about denazifying, because it's not Nazis that are holding the power. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah. And I even hate to utter the word when I'm, writing an essay or trying to convince somebody I know that's really, the scales have been pulled off their eyes about all sorts of things. These are the people who didn't get the jabs and, didn't get locked down and already homeschool their kids and all sorts of stuff. But, Putin's both Stalin and Hitler. I'm like, okay, well, he can't be that. And then he starts talking about Nazis. And I'm just like, I mean, they are kind of legit Nazis, but yeah, I mean,
but are they funded? Are they real? Are they just playing a part? Are they, you know what I mean? It just seems they seem so cringy Hollywood.
I know. So I'm writing a series, and part 2 is it is about that. It's how, if we start, talking about a Rusophobia and Putin as both Hitler and Stalin, and anybody who supports them needs to be shut up and censored and all this kind of thing, that's going to not bode well for any traditionalist in America. But then if we on the right start talking about Nazis all the time, I don't know, it's weird, because I feel like that can maybe turn some kind of normie conservatives, turn the tide, if you're really like, hey, look at these guys. I mean, Bandera and all this kind of stuff. But on the other hand, I don't know, it could be shooting ourselves in the foot to be talking about Nazis all the time, because the powers that be in America think we're Nazis. So I'm not sure.
I think we have to think in terms of like, it's National Socialism is not the ideology that's running the world today. Yes. They don't hold any kind of power. So a lot of times, even in America, when I see these alleged neo-Nazi groups and doing the Heil with the flag that still has the crease on it, and they showed up at some protest, I always feel that it's fake. It's fake a lot of the times, or put on or funded. I don't know, maybe there are some genuine National Socialists there, but would they be supporting a Jewish president and exactly the global homo system and war with their brothers? And it doesn't make sense to me. They would want to make peace. They would understand the history of this area and just work to make peace with their brothers.
Yeah, or they just don't want to budge an inch. And that's another thing that I try to make that connection with people, that there were no concessions, there was no compromise, nothing that the Russian Federation asked for over the years. I mean, they were laughed at. Nothing was met. And I mean, maybe these people are such nationalists, whether they're National Socialists or not, they just want it all. They want that blob called Ukraine, and they're willing to kill people. I don't know. But I as a secessionist, as a person who believes in decentralization, I don't understand why you would want people to force people to live together, who
Exactly.
speak a different language, are different kinds of Christianity, if Christian at all, because a lot of the people in the West would be Uniates and atheists, and a lot of the people, in the East, am I getting my geography right? I'm trying to picture it in my head. Are Orthodox Christians, or sympathetic to Orthodox Christianity, and I don't know. It just sounds real Yankeefied to me, which is what my essay said recently. And there's just a bunch of Western carpetbaggers there causing trouble,
agitating and making problems and bringing in more guns. All these anti-gun people love these missiles and tanks and guns and fighter jets. Exactly. But what you said, self-determination. It's about self-determination, and there's people in these regions that want to be their own independent republic, right? Basically. And if you support peace, why not just let that happen?
Yeah. Right. I guess because those people would not be under the thumb of the Yankee Empire.
Yeah, exactly.
/ Globo Homo. That's what that is. So yeah, you had brought up the whole Putin is Hitler and Stalin. I mean, what do you think about that? Can that jibe in America just because people don't understand World War II history?
It's laughable because they're neither. They think of themselves as like the third way, right? The third path. And so in Russia, it's not communism anymore. They're not Nazis. Remember, Putin's proud that Russia defeated Nazis, even though they were communists back then.
Right.
So they're on this whole other path that has nothing to do with any of those things anymore. And I think it's hard for Americans because they're just always stuck in that paradigm.
Yeah. Yeah, it's odd.
And it works because one side hates Stalin, one side hates Hitler, and then it's just like they just can keep rehashing this Nazi thing all the time, which America's just like obsessed with. And I think Putin thinks he's going to win some brownie points or something with the liberals. Maybe. You know how a lot of conservatives will try and do that. Oh, you're the real Nazi or whatever, even though they're the communists. Maybe he's trying to do a little bit of that angling too.
I'm not sure. I am hoping that maybe people will start to study World War II more in a more nuanced way, because I've tried to tell this to people forever. I mean, there were people who were Nazis who became Nazis because they were fighting against communism. Like, I totally get that. And then there were people who fought for the USSR because they saw their home being invaded. So they fought for the communists and the Allies because they were defending their home, and nobody suffered more during World War II than the Russians. So maybe people will start to pick apart that and go beyond the really cheesy.
That's just it. There's a lot of nuances in war, right? It's not always just like good and bad. There's all these other forces in between and people meddling, and there really is that fog of war. But yes, you have to question anytime we look in the history books, and that's been one of our big things, questioning World War II and the history surrounding that. We even talked about things like Dresden and the firebombing of all these innocent women and children. I mean, it's horrific. Eisenhower's camp of Germans who surrendered after the war. I mean, there's all these horrific things that happened. A lot of people died. And there's a lot of things that we're not told about that era, and I think it's used for propaganda purposes, obviously, to hammer that, you're a Nazi if you want something that the Germans had or wanted. Or believed, so we always have to keep that in mind and looking at war. But one of the things about World War II, what really got me to look into it was the fact that people can sit in jail for questioning history. There's been scientists and researchers and historians who have spent time in prison in Germany for just questioning certain things surrounding World War II. So that was when I was like, okay, this is an area we need to look into.
Right. In my recent essay where I was trying to do a Dixian perspective. So, I mean, that's exactly what happens to Southerners. Lincoln was a demigod, and, Robert E. Lee was the Antichrist, and that's it. The end of the story. Move on to, early
Southerners just had slaves, and it was all about slavery and like all these other lies. Yeah.
Like, it's nuanced and so much more interesting than that. And you have to look at the, human perspective of it all and what people are living under, et cetera, et cetera.
Exactly.
So, I watched the Oliver Stone documentary, Ukraine on Fire, recently. And it's one of the things, even watching these great documentaries that are uncovering all this stuff, before February 2022, doing great work on what was happening in the Donbass and just all the suffering taking place there. And, they're calling the people in Kiev, the right wingers, this right wing ideology. What do you think about that? I mean, you call yourself right wing, correct?
Yeah.
So,
sorry, go on.
do you think National Socialism is right wing, or is it so far right it becomes like, like I always get confused when I'm like, I don't know, I don't think I really consider it right wing. Is it that just because I'm not one? I don't know. What do you
So
think?
there's a lot, I guess there's a lot of things you mean National Socialism in
Yeah.
particular. I mean, it's very traditional, aligns with a lot of Christian values. I think the one area that it doesn't align with Christian values is it's not free market capitalism.
Mhm.
That's probably the area where people say, oh, it's more left because of the, let's say, the free healthcare or not having capitalist system. But I guess I know we'd have to look at like Mussolini's version of fascism, for instance, versus Germany's version. I know that they paid lower taxes, for instance. They were taking care of their economies were thriving, things were doing well, families were happy, women were happy. So I don't know. I guess that's maybe why we don't also have to think of left wing and right wing as much. There's a lot of people that are trying to break out of that because you can get pigeonholed into all these different things, and that's why I even saying nationalist and globalist, but I guess I do call myself a nationalist if I'm going to really simplify, because I believe in self-determination for that nation,
Right.
But yeah, I mean, National Social, there actually was very pro-family. It was very Christian in a lot of ways. They didn't support degeneracy or things that were happening in Weimar, Berlin, where like the first transsexuals and sex change operations and pedophilia, and they were against all of that. So they actually were quite clean cut in a lot of ways. I think that's why the left calls them, far right extreme. It calls it far right extremism.
Yeah, the left-right paradigm can be, again, too simplistic. So would you say you're a nationalist, like with a lowercase n? Would you believe like I'm a secessionist? Are you just like, that's silly, it can never happen, like you want it to be from sea to shining sea? Or
No,
do you
I
mean
definitely
nations within?
Yes, I definitely like this idea of balkanization.
Okay.
Absolutely. I think this country's too big. It's too divided. We're never going to put it together again.
Amen.
People already, they self-segregate. They want to live with people that they want to live with, and we should support that. We should have different republics. I would love to see a Republic of Idaho, for instance, or the South having their own region. I think that is on the path to actually creating a more peaceful thing that can work out. Okay, you want that, you move to California. You want that, move south. You want that, move to Idaho. And we already see that happening right now, especially after Biden came into power. There's just like so many political refugees fleeing these liberal cesspits and going to these red areas and forming their communities and stuff. So I'd love to see a balkanization in America. For sure.
Yeah, and Jefferson called that the empires of liberty, but it does require kind of live and let live. So we would have to we would maybe have to step back and defend our borders of our little republics much better, and be very careful about letting left-wingers or Yankees or whatever come in.
not be so nice, but I think the powers that be, they don't want this to happen, because we'll show them how we can thrive. Right. And how well we can live without their influence. But I think a lot of stuff's going to happen in this country. It's going to be very unpredictable. And as things fall apart, these things are going to become closer to a reality where people can pick up the pieces and organize and do these things as things start really crumbling. They're going to have to.
Yeah. Yeah. I was talking, my husband and I were talking about it the other day. We've been, wanting secession and wanting decentralization for so long. And now it's probably going to happen, but it's going to be really rough too. The same part, scary times lay ahead, but I think it has to occur. I don't see how, like you said, this thing can't be put back together.
No, and when an empire crumbles, when it falls, we want this empire to crumble. We want this empire to fall, and there's always going to be a painful process, but it needs to happen. It'll be better in the end, in the long run.
Yes. And that's why being a student of history is a good thing, because you can look at how people navigated it and survived it, or didn't survive it, but, did the right thing as they were not surviving it or whatever. And, back to our children, it stinks that they're not going to have the childhoods that we had, because I had a pretty good childhood too. Born in 1971, child of the 70s. Totally free, didn't know. There were gas lines and all sorts of stuff. I had no idea what was going on. I was riding my bike and being free. So it's interesting times lay ahead for sure.
Yeah.
Well, Lana, I could talk to you more and more and more, but I know I've taken about an hour and a half of your time, and I just thank you so much and am so honored to have talked with you, and keep up the good work. You and Henrik are doing so many wonderful things, and I hope that I can turn on a few people to your station, your website that maybe haven't heard of you before, because I think y'all just are doing valuable stuff.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate it. And it's a pleasure getting to know you a little bit better and see all your articles. And I'm really impressed. So thank you for making the time for me too.
Oh, thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.